Yes, I am Kristen Welker in for Hallie Jackson on this morning after a fiery night for the candidates right here in Las Vegas. Hallie joins us in just a moment to give us her key takeaways and what it was like inside that room. The candidates out today making their final pitch to voters. Some are aiming to build momentum and others hoping to pick up the pieces with one key test behind them. The other, the caucus is here now just 48 hours away. The debate here on MSNBC by far the most consequential and contentious clash to date. More hits per minute than a Vegas heavyweight fight. Newcomer Michael Bloomberg taking most of the punches, with Senator Elizabeth Warren not holding back and leading the charge against the former New York mayor.
A billionaire who calls women fat broads and horse-faced lesbians. And no, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg. Are you willing to release all of those women from those non-disclosure agreements?
They signed those agreements, and we'll live with it.
Democrats take a huge risk if we just substitute one arrogant billionaire for another.
Mr. Bloomberg had policies in New York City of stop and frisk.
The one thing that I'm really worried about, embarrassed about, was how it turned out with stop and frisk.
And that was just a little sampling, folks. We are on the ground with reporting on where the campaigns go from here. And also happening this hour, breaking news out of Washington. President Trump's longtime confidant, Roger Stone, is in a D.C. courtroom right now being sentenced for his convictions for lying to Congress and witness tampering. Our NBC team is ready to go this morning, covering all the headlines. We do want to start right here in Las Vegas. Garrett Hake is covering the Bloomberg campaign, and Ali Vitale following Elizabeth Warren. Garrett, I do want to start with you. I know you've been up overnight, as we all have been. I want to put up some of the big headlines from Mike Bloomberg's hometown of New York. This is his hometown. This is the New York Post. Black and Bloom. Check out the Daily News. Bloom goes the dynamite. Garrett, not exactly the headlines the Bloomberg campaign was expecting to see this morning. So take us inside the campaign, Garrett. What is the campaign saying, and how are they attempting to spin last night?
Frankly, Kristen, I expect better from the New York Post on a day like this. But look, the campaign is saying publicly that the size of the target on Michael Bloomberg's back showed the strength that he is perceived to have within this field. And to the degree they are trying to find highlights from last night, they're pointing to the way that they feel like he got under Bernie Sanders' skin. As much as we talk about Mike Bloomberg, Bernie Sanders is still the front runner in this race. And so the Bloomberg campaign is trying to paint him as someone who presented himself as the leading alternative to Bernie Sanders. Privately, the campaign concedes that the mayor was rusty, that this is not exactly the kind of performance they would like to see, but they point out that all the other candidates on that stage had 8 other debates to knock that rust off and get ready to go. They believe that their candidate is someone who's going to be in this race for quite a while, that he'll have opportunities to improve along the way, possibly as soon as the debate in South Carolina next week, should he qualify. But they acknowledge that that's probably not going to be good enough to continue to improve his standing, even if they believe that it didn't fundamentally alter the race. I mean, the trick with Bloomberg is that he can continue to be on TV in a major way between now and the next debates, spinning whichever narrative he wants out of it in a way that the other candidates simply can't.
All right, Garrett, thank you for that. I want to go now to Ali Vitale, who's covering the Warren campaign. Very different night for Senator Warren, Ali. She had what was widely considered a strong debate performance last night. She came out swinging from the get-go, really led the charge against the former New York mayor, Michael Bloomberg. And I know you spoke to her right after the debate. What is she saying? How is she assessing her performance last night?
I think in the spin room last night, as soon as the candidates got off the stage, we could tell that the Elizabeth Warren campaign was feeling good. For her right now, it's just keep campaigning, get on the airwaves, do interviews, get out here on the ground in Nevada and keep talking with voters. But the goal for them on the debate stage last night was to not be ignored, not be left out of the conversation. And Elizabeth Warren certainly did that. She got the most speaking time of anybody on that stage. Yes, a lot of it was dedicated to hitting Michael Bloomberg. Those are the moments that we're talking about. But she also had a few crucial moments where she was able to, for example, talk about her wealth tax, talk about her health care plan. But those Bloomberg moments, those are the ones that really stole the show. Clearly, that was a strategy. I asked her, though, after in the spin room, if that was the right strategy. Listen to what she told me, Kristen. You had a lot to say about Michael Bloomberg.
Yeah.
But do you feel like you might have been going after the wrong person? Bernie Sanders is the front runner.
Not at all. Keep in mind that Michael Bloomberg has already dropped $400 million in advertising on this campaign and climbed up in the polls because of that. He did not make his way into the polls by going out and talking to voters, by shaking hands with people, by asking questions, listening to them. He completely circumvented the democratic process and said, hey, I'm just rich enough to make this happen.
And Kristen, clearly this is a candidate no longer afraid to make contrast, to show that she's aggressive on that stage. But that being said, the pitch that we'd been hearing from her in the previous weeks has been a candidate of unity. Certainly that's not the word that I would use, but the argument that was innate in that unity candidate argument was that she's a candidate who can build coalitions, that she's a candidate who can bridge the so-called moderate and progressive lanes of the party. And even just think of who she was standing next to on that stage. She was attacking Michael Bloomberg. She was drawing contrast with Bernie Sanders. Those are the two lanes of the party that she wants to build and bridge between. Those are the two parts of the party that she thinks that she can build a coalition between as well. So I think the days of unity candidate are gone, but the days of Elizabeth Warren pitching herself as the kind of candidate who can build a coalition, especially as this field winnows, I think those days are just beginning, and clearly she's not shying away from being aggressive in making that pitch.
It's a great point, Hallie, and I think you asked her the right question. A lot of folks watching the debate last night were asking, why was there not more attention on Senator Sanders from some of those candidates? Because he is, of course, the front runner, as you so aptly pointed out. All right, Garrett Haake, Ali Vitale, thank you both so much for great reporting, as always. I'm joined now by two of the five moderators of last night's fantastic debate. John Ralston, editor of the Nevada Independent and an MSNBC political analyst, and Hallie Jackson, NBC News chief White House correspondent, who is usually here anchoring this hour, happens to be my good friend. Good to see you.
I gotta thank you, Kristen, for stepping in. I've been battling this laryngitis for 3 days. We managed to pull it out on the debate stage last night, but thank you for stepping in for the 60 minutes. I wanted to give you a little.
It's my pleasure and honor to do it.
Your dulcet tones to the people.
You muscled through it. You gave a whole new meaning to Road Warrior.
Thank you.
It was so strong and tremendous. Congratulations to both of you. Just tremendous debate last night. Hallie, let me start with you. Yeah. What was the takeaway for you in that room?
Lester Holt, our colleague here at NBC, said it at the top of the show. He said, "We encourage you candidates to get in there and debate. It's your debate. It's your stage." And that is, what you saw last night. Takeaways right from that opening moment with Elizabeth Warren, where she went after Mayor Bloomberg. I mean, at that point, you kind of knew, and I think John sitting up on stage, you knew, okay, this is going to be, this is not, and it shouldn't be about us. And the goal is that I think was made. It's about them going after Mayor Bloomberg, as Ali and Garrett are talking about, trying to get their Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar. Boy, what a storyline there. And the body language, so fascinating to watch as Mayor Buttigieg literally turned to Amy Klobuchar and engaged her one-on-one.
Multiple times, the two of them.
Tried to pull her into that, you know?
Yeah, we're going to look at some of those key moments. But, John, as Hallie said, it was right off the bat. I mean, could you feel it in that room that something different was happening here? Because this really was the most contentious debate we have seen so far.
You know, I always say, and you guys know this as well as anybody, it's hard to tell when you're watching a debate right there how it comes across compared to how it might come across on TV. But you being that close, you could feel the tension, and it began to escalate more and more during the debate. It was really something, the feeling when Elizabeth Warren just came right out and put those quotes out there, and everyone's thinking she's talking about Trump, and then turns it and says, I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg. We knew that Bloomberg being there was going to be the story. I think we anticipated in preparing for the debate that this would happen. But the best thing about that debate, as Hallie indicated, was that it was a debate. Right. They debated each other. There were these moments of two people talking. When Elizabeth Warren went after Bloomberg for the non-disclosure.
Yeah, and I want to play that.
And when Mayor Pete and Amy Klobuchar were going after each other, it was really something.
Let's play some of those key moments. Hallie, you teed up these fireworks, essentially, that we saw in the non-disclosure agreement. Let's play this moment and then talk about it on the other side.
Several former employees have claimed that your company was a hostile workplace for women. In a lawsuit in the 1990s, according to the Washington Post, one former female employee alleged that you said, quote, I would do you in a second. Should Democrats expect better from their nominee?
I have no tolerance for the kind of behavior that the Me Too movement has exposed.
Senator Warren, you've been critical of Mayor Bloomberg on this issue.
Yes, I have, and I hope you heard what his defense was. I've been nice to some women. That just doesn't cut it.
None of them accused me of doing anything other than maybe they didn't like the joke I told.
Hallie, what did you make of that moment? Bloomberg and Warren going back and forth on this issue and her pushing him. Are you going to release the non-disclosure?
She had telegraphed this attack line, I think, on him and in some of the comments that she had made prior to the debate. I also think, listen, Mayor Bloomberg had been in this race. You saw over these last week and a half or so before this debate, a lot of news stories drop, right, about his past behavior, some of these comments, that Washington Post piece, for example. You got to think he and his campaign had to have known a question on that topic was coming, or that would come up somehow in the debate, if not from the moderators, then from the candidates on stage. And of course it did. And it was very interesting to watch him on stage in that moment. Remember, he is not somebody who has a ton of debate experience in a multi-person national setting, right? The debates that he had as mayor were very different.
Back in 2009.
A long time ago. Yeah. And so I think that is something that his campaign, I wouldn't be surprised, would be workshopping, because guess what? We got another debate in like 6 days. You know what I mean? So you got to think that they're working on some of this here, because Elizabeth Warren certainly was able to get in some of those punches.
Well, my guess is that Mayor Bloomberg may develop the same laryngitis that Hallie has by the time, and may not be able to make it. May not be able to. But I think the really interesting thing to me, Kristen, was that what's going on here in Nevada. You can't tell. You know, I always talk about Nevada, but it's really especially important. The caucus is important. Elizabeth Warren has essentially tanked after being seen as the front runner just a few months ago. She needed to do something tonight, last night, to activate her supporters. What really struck me, and I don't know if Hallie noticed this too, and it's really a different experience being that close and sensing it. Every candidate but Bloomberg knew what the stakes were. They came with a certain amount of energy. My sense of Bloomberg, and some of the cutaways showed it too, people told me later, rolling his eyes, like, it was like, do I really have to be here? I mean, this is kind of an annoying thing. Do I really have to talk to these people? That was the vibe that I got from him.
I do think you also felt, Kristen, overall, the sense of urgency. Super Tuesday is coming up quick, right?
Yes, it is.
Huge delegate count at stake. Right. Could be, I'm not going to say game over, right? But that is going to give us some real direction in this race. And right now, Senator Sanders has got to be feeling pretty good about how he's doing, or how he might end up doing then.
And a lot of Democrats saying, hey, wait a minute, he could have this locked up by Super Tuesday. Let me ask you about Nevada specifically for a moment, if I could, both of you, because we saw Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, as you mapped out at the top, Hallie, really going after each other. He attacked her for not remembering in a recent interview the president of Mexico. So you had this heated exchange between the two of them. Here you have Buttigieg, who has essentially said, look, I can win in more diverse places like Nevada. Does that sort of an exchange, John Ralston, help him to win here, or to have a strong showing here at least, which he needs?
You know, it's hard to tell what's going to translate. It's a caucus. We know how crazy it is. They've had huge turnout here. About 75,000 people turned out in early voting. That's almost as many as turned out in the caucus day 4 years ago. So, Kristen, Pete Buttigieg has a phenomenal organization here that he built, anticipating if he did well in Iowa and New Hampshire, he could build on that momentum. And I thought that those exchanges with Amy Klobuchar, he had a message to deliver too, and he was the one who delivered it 2 or 3 times. There are two polar opposites on this stage. Michael Bloomberg, the billionaire, and Bernie Sanders, who doesn't want any billionaires. So then there's the fight for the middle. And so they all were trying to get to that. And I think he sees Klobuchar, who did very well in New Hampshire, as competition. And so he wanted to draw a contrast.
Great point. Final thoughts, Hallie?
I agree with everything John just said.
Good.
That's never happened to me before.
John Ralston. Hallie's going to rest her voice. She will be back as soon as possible. Thanks to both of you. Congratulations again on a fantastic night. We're so proud of you guys. We are back live now from Las Vegas, covering all the headlines out here. But there's also breaking news right now out of Washington happening there right now. Roger Stone is being sentenced in federal court. The longtime confidant of the president was found guilty last year on 7 charges that include lying to Congress and witness tampering. Today's sentencing happening after the 4 career federal prosecutors quit the case last week after their recommended sentence of up to 9 years behind bars was overruled by Attorney General William Barr. NBC's Ken Delanian is outside of district court in Washington. So, Ken, the president's made it pretty clear that he does not think this case is fair. He's been tweeting about it. He's been talking about it. So it's against that backdrop that we are tracking the breaking news right now out of Washington. So what exactly is happening right now in that building behind you?
The hearing, Kristen, is just underway. Roger Stone is sitting inside before the judge. And today, after a week of controversy over what the recommendation for the sentence for Roger Stone will be, Judge Amy Berman Jackson will actually impose a sentence. And there's high drama around what exactly that will be because of the very dispute that you described, where on one day, the Justice Department, the line prosecutors in the case, recommended a very strong sentence of 7 to 9 years. And they talked about aggravating factors in the case because Stone was not only convicted of lying to Congress, but of tampering with a witness. And then the very next day, after intervention from the Attorney General William Barr, the Justice Department recommended a much lighter sentence of 3 to 4 years. And the 4 line prosecutors in the case resign from the case. And so now all of this goes before the judge. And one of the questions is whether she will inquire of the Justice Department exactly what happened. And amid all of this, Kristen, the president is tweeting about this case, and he tweeted a clip from Fox News personality Tucker Carlson, who called for Trump to pardon Roger Stone. So all of this that's happening behind me may be moot if the president decides that he is going to set Stone free in this case.
And of course, that is an option the president has not ruled out. And we know that he did issue close to a dozen pardons and commutations earlier this week that got so much attention. All right, Ken Delanian, we know you're going to stand by. If there is any breaking news, run right back to the camera outside district court for us in Washington. Thank you for that report. We really appreciate it. This morning, the Democratic candidates Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are getting a boost in the fundraising race, according to their campaigns. The Warren campaign announcing they raised more than $2.8 million Wednesday, their best debate day to date, they say, which just edges out Bernie Sanders, whose campaign says it brought in $2.7 million. While the Vermont senator is walking away from the debate relatively unbruised, he was forced to defend himself on some sticky subjects. Take a look.
I'm actually less concerned about the lack of transparency on Sanders' personal health than I am about the lack of transparency on how to pay for his health care plan.
When you asked Bernie how much it cost, the last time he said that, I think it was on your show, he said, we'll find out.
When it comes to your plan, Elizabeth, and Bernie's on Medicare for All, you don't put your money on a number that's not even on the wheel.
His campaign relentlessly attacks everyone who asks a question or tries to fill in details.
The best-known socialist in the country happens to be a millionaire with 3 houses. What I miss here?
NBC News road warrior Shaquille Brewster is here in Las Vegas covering the Sanders campaign. He's been with the campaign since the very beginning. So, Shaq, you've been talking to the campaign. How are they feeling about last night, and where does Senator Sanders go from here?
Well, they're feeling good. And, you know, you can tell, despite Senator Sanders not liking how Mayor Bloomberg got on that debate stage, he appreciated having him there. First, it gave him a natural foil. He was able to direct some of his regular stump lines directly towards Mayor Bloomberg. And it also helped deflect some attention away from Senator Sanders. Now, that's not to say that he didn't get some attention and receive some scrutiny. He did receive a little bit more scrutiny than we've seen him receive in the past. Listen to him defend his online supporters or explain the toxic nature of those so-called Bernie bros. Listen to that moment.
We have over 10.6 million people on Twitter, and 99.9% of them are decent human beings, are working people. If there are a few people who make ugly remarks, who attack trade union leaders, I disown those people. They are not part of our movement. If you look at the Wild West of the internet, talk to some of the African-American women on my campaign. Talk to Senator Nina Turner. Talk to others and find the vicious, racist, sexist attacks that are coming their way as well.
And the bottom line is the campaign feels like he came into last night's debate surging. They feel like he held his own despite the target being placed on his back. They feel like he was aggressive towards Mayor Bloomberg. So for them, it was a win. Kristen?
Shaquille Brewster covering the Sanders campaign. Shaq, I know it's going to be a busy couple of days for you. Thank you so much. The national co-chair for Bernie Sanders' campaign, former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner, who was just spoken about, joins me now live. Thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. Before we delve into it, I do just want to have you touch on what we just heard from Senator Sanders, the fact that he says others are getting vicious attacks online. Speak to that. And does Senator Sanders need to do more to speak out against some of his supporters who other people have said are crossing lines in that regard?
You know, every campaign has people that go too far, and the senator is exactly right. I mean, for me, the types of attacks, I couldn't even say the types of things that people have put out on social media because it would be so vulgar and inappropriate for daytime TV. Senator Sanders is standing up for the people on his campaign who are attacked. Bree Joy, for example, his national press secretary, attacked viciously all the time. Dr. Jane Sanders, his wife, attacked viciously all the time. People have a one-sided notion about this. They only talk about the supporters of Senator Sanders, or maybe the supporters. Anybody can be anybody on social media. The senator has said until he's blue in the face that he does not accept vicious attacks from people. But other folks don't talk about how other people come at people like me in this campaign in some of the most sexist, racist ways ever imaginable, and it is totally unacceptable.
All right, let's talk about some of the other big headlines last night. Bloomberg got a lot of attention. Candidates piled on him. Do you think they delivered a knockout blow last night?
Oh, yeah, they did. I think Mayor Bloomberg was on the wrong stage last night, obviously. I mean, his record cannot stand the test of time. He is a Republican. We all know that. Coming into this Democratic primary, the voters of Nevada should be insulted that he was even on that stage because he's not even on the ballot.
Bloomberg's campaign says he's just getting warmed up, though. More to come.
Well, you know, he has a lot of money, so they write on that in terms of being able to try to buy the presidency.
I want to get your reaction to something that Bloomberg said to Senator Sanders last night. Let's just play that clip one more time.
What a wonderful country we have. The best-known socialist in the country happens to be a millionaire with 3 houses. What I miss here?
Your reaction to that line of attack, are you concerned that some voters will see that and say, hey, wait a minute, is Senator Sanders being hypocritical here?
No, his record is intact. What Mayor Bloomberg was doing was deflecting. This man is worth $60 billion. And instead of building a grassroots movement like Senator Sanders has over the years, instead of being out there on the picket line, standing up for the people, when he was mayor of New York, he vetoed a paid sick leave. That's what he did. He promoted stop and frisk. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, you got Senator Sanders campaigning on the ground with the workers of this country. Fight for 15, for example. 400,000 people working at Amazon and Disney got raises before the senator even becomes the next president of the United States of America. There's a contrast here. The question becomes, Christian, whose side are you on? And Senator Sanders, roll the tape, it's very clear that he is on the side of the workaday people of this nation from all walks of life.
One of the most fascinating moments came last night when Chuck asked the candidates about a brokered convention.
Yes.
Senator Sanders was the only candidate to say that he did not welcome a brokered convention, which was a change from 2016 when he said this. He said at the end of the nominating process, no candidate will have enough pledged delegates. In other words, the Democratic National Convention will be a contested convention. Has he changed his position because he thinks it now helps him?
He's clear. No, absolutely not. As you know, we had the Unity Reform Commission, got together. Secretary Clinton had folks on there, Senator Sanders. I was one of those folks, and also Chairman Perez. One of the things that was produced from that is to make sure that the superdelegates only vote on the second ballot, not on the first. Senator Sanders was the only one on that stage that said that the people's voice should reign supreme. Everybody else, because they don't have the same kind of movement and commitment of the people that he does, said, oh no, let the rules.
So, but just to be clear, he would not support a contested or brokered convention if it were close, if the delegate math were not clear.
What the senator is saying is that the people should have the final say, and that superdelegates should not be able to put their bodies on the scale.
Okay, and just very quickly, 2/3 of voters say they would not support a socialist candidate. Should that be a concern for voters who are considering Senator Sanders in a general election?
Absolutely
How can he beat
not.
President Trump?
He has the highest favorability rating. He's polling the highest, and I know all polls are snapshots in time, but he has built a movement movement, not just throwing money around, not just trying to buy it, but going from state to state to state, talking to people, understanding their needs. No, they shouldn't be afraid of it. As Senator Sanders pointed out, when the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he condemned this nation. He talked about materialism, militarism, materialism, racism, and poverty. And as we all know, before he was assassinated, he was bringing together working class people, the poor people's movement. So no, people are on the side of Senator Bernie Sanders, and the polling shows that very, very clearly.
All right, well, I know it's a busy couple days for you guys the next 48 hours. All right, Nina,
yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate your perspective this morning. We're back live here in Las Vegas with just 2 days until the Nevada caucus, and an influential Democratic voice here is talking to us about how he sees the state of the 2020 primary race. Former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid speaking openly about the candidates, their policy positions, and why Nevada's contest could be so pivotal. NBC's Leanne Caldwell is here with me, where she interviewed Harry Reid last night. So, Leanne, so good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Of course.
What were your key takeaways? He hasn't endorsed anyone yet. As I said, he's a kingmaker. He was the Senate Majority Leader for 8 years.
Yeah.
So what did he say to you?
Well, Senator Reid has never been one to shy away from his opinion, and he didn't yesterday either. He talked a lot about a lot of things. He was very strong on a big issue, Medicare for All, that is dividing the Democrats. He said he doesn't support it. They should do a public option. He's warned Democrats about moving too far to the left on immigration, saying that we shouldn't decriminalize border crossing. You can't have open borders. We are a country of laws. He said Bernie Sanders is doing well because he's been campaigning for president for years. And then I asked him about Elizabeth Warren, and this is what he had to say, Kristen.
I want to ask you about Senator Warren. It seems like you have a sweet spot for her. You were very instrumental in her running for Senate. Why do you think she isn't taking off as some predicted that she would?
They were saying the same thing about Amy Klobuchar 2 months ago that they're saying about Elizabeth now. And where's Amy now? She's now being be one of the front runners. A lot can change and will change. So I wouldn't count Elizabeth out of the race.
Interesting. What did you make of that?
Yeah, he does have a sweet spot for Warren, and he says it's too early. He said Iowa and New Hampshire are not representative of the country. Nevada is, and so just wait and see what Nevada does, Kristen.
He was fired up yesterday when he spoke before the debate. He said Nevada should go first. I spoke to former Vice President Joe Biden about a potential Reid endorsement. He seemed optimistic. Let me play you a piece of sound, then I want to get your take on the other side. Take a look. Harry Reid was on stage tonight. He said he hasn't endorsed anyone yet. Are you talking to him? Do you think you might get his endorsement before Saturday?
I think I'll get his endorsement.
You do?
I didn't say before Saturday. I think I'll get his endorsement.
But possibly before Saturday?
I think Harry has made a commitment that he would not endorse anybody before the caucus is finished.
So, Leanne, a fair amount of optimism, measured confidence there from Vice President Biden?
Well, Reid has never endorsed anyone before Nevada caucuses. And when I pressed him on who he thinks would be the best person to beat President Trump, he said any of the candidates would. But look, he has a close relationship with a lot of people up on that debate stage last night. He was instrumental in Senator Warren running for Senate. When he was leader of the Senate, he put Bernie Sanders in leadership. He gave him a key committee. And of course, he's worked with Joe Biden for a long time as senator and then vice president. But I don't think that that's necessarily a shoo-in for Vice President Joe Biden. But Joe Biden's optimism, maybe it'll ring through.
We will see. It'll be interesting. It will be interesting. Leanne, thank you so much. Great conversation. Thanks for bringing it to us. Appreciate it. Great to see you. Now I want to bring in Secretary Julian Castro, who, of course, is a former presidential candidate and is now a surrogate for Senator Elizabeth Warren's campaign. Before that, he served as the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development in the Obama administration. Thank you so much for joining us, Secretary Castro. Really appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
So I want to get your take on Senator Warren's debate performance last night. She came out swinging from the very beginning. The stakes could not have been higher for her. She was coming off of what was undoubtedly a disappointing showing in New Hampshire and in Iowa. Do you think she revived her campaign last night?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, everybody saw last night with their own eyes how well prepared Elizabeth Warren is. They saw what she did to Mayor Bloomberg. She exposed him. She has made a career of holding unaccountable billionaires accountable, whether from Wall Street or in politics, and that's what she did last night. I mean, she did a spectacular job last night. I think y'all mentioned earlier that the campaign has said that they raised $2.8 million yesterday. It was a fantastic fundraising day. I think her performance got a lot of people's attention for the right reasons, because we want somebody who in October, when they're on that debate stage with Donald Trump, can eviscerate him. And she showed what she can do to one unaccountable billionaire. She can do it to Donald Trump in October.
Secretary, let me play you a little snippet of last night and some of the feisty back and forth we saw from Senator Warren, and then I want to get your reaction on the other side.
I'd like to talk about who we're running against. A billionaire who calls women fat broads and horse-faced lesbians. And no, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg. Democrats are not going to win if we have a nominee who has a history of hiding his tax returns, of harassing women, and of supporting racist policies.
And Secretary Castro, that was just the first few minutes of the debate. She was just getting going there. So a lot of her supporters are asking, where was this Elizabeth Warren 3 months ago? Did she need to show this fight earlier?
No, well, look, this has always been who she is. I mean, look at her career standing up the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Before that, fighting for consumers. She mentioned last night going to Nevada and fighting for folks to be able to stay in their homes. I mean, she has made a career of standing up for everyday Americans and holding people accountable. And last night, she held Mayor Bloomberg accountable for several things. But to me, you know, one of the most important moments in the debate was when she asked, Mayor, will you allow all of these women who say that they were sexually harassed in your company to get out of their non-disclosure agreements so that they can tell their side of the story? Yeah, I think that's a simple request and a reasonable request, and he didn't have an answer.
Secretary, let me play that because you raise it. We want to remind our viewers what you're talking about. Let's play that, and then let's talk about it on the other side.
What we need to know is exactly what's lurking out there. He has gotten some number of women, dozens, who knows, to sign non-disclosure agreements, both for sexual harassment and for gender discrimination in the workplace.
We have a very few non-disclosure agreements.
How many is
Let me finish.
How many is that?
None of them accuse me of doing anything other than maybe they didn't like the joke I told.
She was clearly ready for this moment, for this question. Go ahead, Secretary.
Yeah, I mean, this was the important point, and I think she said this right after that. This goes directly to electability. In Elizabeth Warren, you have somebody who has been fighting for everyday Americans, fighting against Wall Street excesses, making sure that everybody is treated equally and the same. And in Michael Bloomberg, what you have is a guy who has, you know, I think dozens, they've said, of women who have raised sexual harassment and similar complaints about either his personal behavior or behavior at his company. Who do you think is going to do better going up against Donald Trump in November? Who's going to do better in that debate stage against Trump?
Secretary Castro, very quickly, what does a win look like here in Nevada? Does she need to come in the top 3?
Well, I think that she's going to do very well. And, you know, I stopped predicting what's going to happen in this race a long time ago. But
does she need to come
I believe that she's going to do very well.
Justify her candidacy?
Well, I think after last night's performance, I think that she's going to do well there in Nevada.
All right, Secretary Julian Castro, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it and appreciate your insights. We do want to get back to Washington and the breaking news there in the sentencing hearing for Roger Stone, NBC's Ken Delaney, and outside district court in Washington. Ken, I know we're getting another update about what is happening inside that courtroom. The judge speaking. What can you tell us?
Well, Kristen, the judge got right into it in terms of addressing that controversy over the Justice Department pulling back on the sentencing recommendation. She almost made sort of a sarcastic comment. I want to read it to you. It's very interesting. She said, "For those of you who are new to this or who woke up last week and became persuaded that the guidelines are harsh," she means federal sentencing guidelines, "I can assure you that defense attorneys and many judges have been making that point for a long time. But we don't usually succeed in getting government to agree to that second department filing in the over prosecutors where they said
all right, and I think Ken Delanian's shot did go down, but again, bringing us an update from inside the courtroom there, Roger Stone sentencing hearing, and we will continue to track that, and we will go back to Ken as soon as we can get him back. Meantime, the Democratic race much different now than it was just 24 hours ago. How Michael Bloomberg plans to survive a brutal beatdown from his primary opponents. One member of Congress backing the former mayor, Congressman Stacey Plaskett, joins us live. But first, this morning, dozens of Americans quarantined at Camp Ashland are being released. 57 people were transported from China to the National Guard base in Nebraska after possible exposure to coronavirus. They have been held there now for the past 2 weeks. We're back after a quick break.
I'm Philip Mena, live in New York City here. We want to toss it out to Washington, where Ken Delanian is standing by outside of the federal courthouse there. And we're going to get an update, hopefully, from Ken on the latest on the sentencing of Roger Stone. Ken?
Stuart, Judge Amy Berman Jackson got right into the controversy over the Justice Department sentencing recommendation for Roger Stone. She sort of sarcastically commented to the courtroom and to observers that normally it's the defense that is arguing that the federal sentencing guidelines are too harsh. And as we saw in recent days, the Justice Department and the Attorney General himself, William Barr, weighed in and reversed a sentencing recommendation of 7 to 9 years, arguing that the sentencing guidelines and the enhancements didn't apply to Roger Stone. But in this hearing, in this courtroom behind me, the judge is ruling differently. So far, on 2 separate enhancements, one for threatening a witness and one for obstructing the investigation, she has said that they do apply to Roger Stone, and that suggests that the sentence will be in the upper range of the guidelines, as high as 7 to 9 years, as prosecutors said the guidelines called for. Now, there are other mitigating factors. Stone is a first offender. He's 67 years old, so the sentence may not go that high. And against all of this backdrop, Stuart, is Donald Trump today tweeting a Fox News commentator suggesting he may pardon Roger Stone. So all this that's happening in the courthouse may be moot. But what is certain is that Judge Amy Berman Jackson is taking a much tougher view of this case than the president and Attorney General William Barr, and she's the one who's going to decide the sentence today. I should also add that whatever she decides today, Roger Stone will not be whisked off to prison because there is a pending motion for a new trial that she said she will decide on before she imposes sentence. Back to you.
Hey, Ken, do we have any idea how long this sentencing hearing is going to last today?
Generally, these kinds of hearings last about 2 hours because there are arguments about the sentence from both sides and about the various technical enhancements, and then Stone himself will be given a chance to address the court, and then sometimes the judge will take a break to consider her sentence. So I think 2 hours, maybe 3 is a safe bet for the time period.
All right, that is Ken Delanian with the latest from Washington on the Roger Stone sentencing. Ken, thank you so much, and we'll be right back here on MSNBC.